Clubhouse.
Welcome to the True Crime TV podcast, where our hosts cover a variety of these shows, sometimes just one episode, sometimes the whole season. Join us as we get to the bottom of the case together.
Welcome back to Pod Clubhouse's coverage of True Crime TV with a special Love It or Leave It edition of Candy, which is premiering on Hulu. Today with me, I have Paul from Pod Clubhouse.
Hi, thanks for having me.
And I have Colleen from our True Crime series.
Hi.
So we're here to talk about Candy on Hulu. So Colleen and I are kind of like the true crime aficionados around here. And
Yeah.
had you heard about this story before we even get into whatever it is?
No, had not heard a word before hearing about this production.
We devour a lot of true crime, and a lot of my true crime
Welcome to the True
listening
Crime TV
and watching
podcast, where our
prowess
hosts cover
comes
a
from
variety of
recommendations
these
from
shows,
Colleen. So if
sometimes just
she
one
hasn't heard
episode,
about it, then you
sometimes the
know
whole
that this
season.
is,
Join
you know,
us
sort
as
of
we get
lore
to the bottom of the
obscura.
case
I'm
together.
honestly shocked there's not an Anne rule book about it. Timing wise and content wise. I grew up in Seattle and I've read way too much Anne Rule and I started way too young. It seems right in her wheelhouse and I'm a little shocked she didn't get to this one.
I guess, Paul, same question, but seeing how you're in Texas, I'm expecting a little bit more.
Well, don't, because I had not heard of this. It's maybe the age of the story. I've noticed that on, say, Netflix or the other streaming series or services that create content and the kind of the ramp up that they have been producing true crime related, say, documentaries and things, they seem to be going back to the same wells. You know, a lot of Ted Bundy, a lot of
Yes.
John Wayne Gacy.
Yes. Son of Sam, that's been done
Yes.
over and over.
The Night Stalker was done recently on one of these, and so
Yes.
that's like the true crime version of rebooting Star Wars or G.I. Joe or Transformers or whatever,
Right.
you know, a tried and true franchise. So this is maybe an experimental thing to see what else people might devour.
Yeah, I think this is a big enough genre too in true crime that like you can start branching out into some of these more local, maybe not hit the national news scene, because the national news scene ones we've, like you just said, like we've seen and devoured so much of this. Hulu is doing this series that is dropping. It's one episode a day for a week leading up to Friday the 13th, which I think is, you know, deliciously macabre, But also, I believe HBO is doing an HBO original production as well about Candy. And it's coming out in the next month or so as well. So there's a weird synergy in terms of timing on this.
That was weird in terms of looking up material about this to talk about with the interview that we did with the show creator and showrunner.
Yes.
I didn't want to cross wires and bring up the other show.
Right, exactly.
That seems to happen though with like disaster movies or whatever, you know, like 2 volcano movies at once or
Right. Dante's Peak.
Yeah, and Volcano, right? Those, I
yeah,
think they came out the same summer.
pretty almost like the same week, if I recall. It was, yeah. Well, actually, this story had been done before. Back in the 90s, 1990, there was a movie called Killing in a Small Town. It starred Barbara Hershey as Candy, Brian Dennehy as Ed Reavers. I guess that's probably like a made-up name.
Yeah, maybe that was done to protect the innocent or not so innocent in this case. Those are some pretty big names for 1990.
Instead of Betty, there's a Peggy.
Okay.
Lee Garlington. I don't know her, but her husband, you know, the one with whom the affair was had, is John Terry, who you will know better as Matthew Fox's dad from Lost, Christian Shepherd.
The title is very movie of the week though, rather than like theatrical release.
Directed by Stephen Gyllenhaal. He's Jake and Maggie's dad.
We needed that during Pam.
Yes.
Colleen was the eagle-eyed one who found, who noticed that the title cards were written in the Law and Order fonts. And
nice.
that Easter egg did not come out until long after the series was airing. And I was like, you heard it here first, people on Pod Clubhouse. So Hulu and IMDb, for once, actually have the same summary from Hulu. Candy Montgomery is a 1980s housewife and mother who did everything right. Good husband, 2 kids, nice house, even the careful planning and execution of transgressions. But when the pressure of conformity builds within her, her actions scream for just a bit of freedom until someone tells her to shush with deadly results. Oh, that is magical. Probably not the best thing to be laughing about, about after just reading that kind of
I know, right? There were a few
plot
things
line.
that we were laughing about in the interview that afterwards I was like, but someone died.
Hang on. Okay, wait a second. I prefaced this in the interview and I'm going to preface it here. We are not psychopaths. Okay. We like true crime. For me, it is a controlled way to be scared. I don't know. I like mysteries. I don't understand how people can go so far off the rails. But however, I still enjoy this.
Well, and this is a fictionalized retelling. It's not meant to be an exact history. And in doing so, they can put in themes and some assumptions that they want to get across, such as the pent-up rage that the showrunner believes all women, or wives in particular, feel, or at least felt in the 80s, but probably still feel today. And they were able to do that with both Betty and Candy, I thought. And it allowed you to compare and contrast how what it was like for each of them, and how they dealt with it. So that was kind of cool, as compared to, say, a documentary where you don't get that sort of emotional insight, I guess, into the character
And build up, right?
Or person, and since these aren't actually characters, they
right, people, right?
Are people. Yes.
So Paul and I were able to do this interview about a week ago with showrunner Robin Veith and creator Nick Antosca. We joked briefly in the interview that this is really a good niche for Jessica Biel, because it's like, I don't know if I want to see her in anything now if she's not covered in blood.
Right. Last time you saw her was probably The Sinner, right?
The Sinner, right? The first season. That just kind of took the world by storm. I remember when that came out, a lot of people were talking about it. It was a different spin on sort of like the crime genre. It's like, we know what happened and now let's find out why. And I saw some of that element here. We see what the crime is kind of early from the trailer, like you see a little bit. And then we just got to find out the why, and it's careful to unravel. We're not going to drop spoilers in this half of the conversation. The second half will tell you all about what we thought about the nitty gritty. But right now we're going to give you sort of like, should you watch it, from a high level overview. We're just going to kind of set things up for you and run down if we think this is going to be worth your while. And then second half will be us dissecting it piece by piece. Robin, we would have seen her work in Mad Men. She was a writer for Mad Men. She was a producer listed on True Blood. She's worked on Law and Order Special Victims Unit. So she has some chops in this area. She did The Act as well. That was on Hulu a couple of years ago. That was really good.
They both did The Act, actually.
Yes, that's right. That's right. I knew that the two of them did something together.
Yeah.
Oh, Nick he was a producer on the latest Chucky.
Their credits skew toward mostly things that have been pretty well received and reasonably heavy in terms of, either needing to stick with a particular like canon, in terms of say the work with Mad Men or The Expanse, which was a science fiction, a totally different kind of genre to write in, but one that had
a different headspace altogether.
But had a huge following, and they needed to follow, rules of the universe, etc.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, so that was like the major creative team.
Which is cool. And they gave a lot of credit to Jessica Biel in terms of being involved, being a very boots on the ground kind of producer.
Yeah, because that can vary wildly with executive producer credit.
Particularly, say, when a creator or something gets that executive producer credit right away, and then is never with the show again after the first season or whatever, but it's still there.
So the major players here, we've got Jessica Biel starring as Candy Montgomery, Melanie Lynskey, she plays Betty Gore. We have Pablo Schreiber as Alan Gore, Timothy Simons as Pat Montgomery. Like, those are the top billed characters. And then you have Don Crowder, played by Raul Esparza.
If you're thinking, I don't know Melanie Lynskey, you probably do.
You do.
You just didn't know that was her name. She works a ton.
Pull her hair back, pull the bangs off her face, and she looks like a completely different person.
Yeah, and she had a long run on, like, say, 2.5 Men, Togetherness on HBO she was in, Castle Rock. She had a major role in the first season of that. Then more recently, and probably the most attention, has been on Yellow Jackets from Showtime, where she played Shauna. If you haven't seen Yellow Jackets, don't wait for our Leoli on it. Just go watch it.
Yeah. And actually, if you want to check out something else that we did a Leoli on, she was in Mrs. America with Kate Blanchett back in 2020. She played another character in there. She was wonderful in that as well.
And then Pablo Schreiber is super tall, Liev Schreiber's half-brother. I most recently saw him in Defending Jacob. He played the DA that... was giving.
Oh, I forgot that he was in that.
He was the one that giving Captain America a pretty hard time.
I remember him from American Gods,
and I know him from Orange Is the New Black, where he's porn stash.
Nice.
and he has much the same mustache in this show that he had in theirs.
The one stranger to me is Timothy Simons. I don't know him so well.
I don't know him either, and I really enjoyed his character. Like, I felt so bad for him.
He was on Veep.
It looks like he does a lot of voice work.
He's someone who also looks quite different from his character in this show.
That hair, man.
Yeah. Oof. Oh, well, we'll talk about the whole aesthetic.
If you look up the actual story, apparently Pat, his character, was balding. So the fact that they gave him such a robust head of hair.
That hair is luscious.
Is an interesting choice.
I was impressed that they were able to tone down Pablo Schreiber's hotness. They made a very beautiful man look very not beautiful.
A sky blue leisure suit will do that.
Oh my God. Just, for me, it was the glasses, there was a lot going on with the costume work here. And then Jessica Biel, I love her. I love her. She's a very understated kind of a person, but then when she's doing her thing, oh my God, she slays it. I like her in this genre because she's believable as this super innocent creature that needs protecting. I'm thinking of her in The Sinner, that she doesn't look capable of doing these things. And the characters that she portrays don't look capable of doing these things until she busts out.
I liked that they really sort of went into her life.
Well, she normally plays the object of desire.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I understand this was 1980, but my goodness.
That is a tough stretch to an object of desire.
No, I thought she really did the all-American homemaker thing very well.
Yeah, I agree.
She wasn't even born when this story happened.
Whereas Betty Gore, Melanie Linsky's character, had a lot of the same wants and desires. Yeah, but just emotionally, she was equipped another way.
I mean, I'll be honest, I don't know if this was based in reality or not, but I looked at her and saw postpartum depression, which is, of course, something that was not talked about at that time.
It wasn't a thing.
But that's what I saw kind of her character struggling with, and also realizing that sort of put people off of her, but not knowing how to, do anything about that.
Yeah, the stigma of mental health care was still pretty strong, well past this time period.
I really felt for her character. I thought she did a nice job of, the people around her maybe thought she was a little off-putting, but you saw the pain the character was in.
For sure. You could sense that she knew she needed to be doing quote unquote better. She wanted to be doing better, but she just couldn't. She just couldn't.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she was stuck in her own rut, and there was no, Colleen, like you said, there was no help mechanism for her. I really enjoyed the vulnerability that she allowed us to see when we did see Betty. Kind of drew me to her, whereas if she hadn't let us in as much as we saw, you could just have turned her off as someone you're just one of those annoying type of people. But you see you a little bit more behind the curtain as to her pain and some of the insecurities that she had, and those real world, she said, she's I'm struggling with the baby weight. right?
Yeah.
From her prior baby. Her prior baby is in elementary school.
Yeah, like
right?
5 by then.
Yeah, 5 or 6, something like that. It's a tagline that I can relate to, it's so I appreciated them giving us those vulnerable moments to see what was really kind of going on with her. Any additional standouts? I know we kind of just ran through like the top billed characters, but was there anybody else who was kind of a standout for you?
The children that they cast were all great child actors. You know that sort of thing where sometimes a child actor comes on and they say the lines, but you just have to click over this thing in your brain. You're like, well, child actors are not that great. These kids, they looked like family units. I don't know how long it took to get those shots. Maybe they had to do all day to get some of those, shots around the table with Pablo Schreiber playing the silly dad or whatever, but it all seemed very natural.
Yeah. I liked the kids, and especially Christina Gore, played by Antonella Rose. There's a couple of moments where her character stood out to me, and also I won't be specific, but I agree. There's a moment between Becky Montgomery's Avon Lotz plays Becky Montgomery, and Antonella Rose plays Christina Gore. And there's a moment between the two of them that I'm just like, somebody needs to make sure that like they get on more shows and things like that, because they can't be more than 8 years old. They're amazing. We're going to move on to Colleen's favorite section, the setting, the visual aesthetic.
They are anchored in a very specific time and place, and I appreciate that they went for it. There is some of the more attractive late 70s going on, and there are some of the less attractive late 70s going on.
What's the attractive part of the late 70s?
I thought her like peignoirs and stuff were kind of fun that she was wearing. I actually also just kind of like a good pussy bow blouse. That was kind of a good period for that too. Paul, you mentioned the powder blue leisure suit that was on. It wasn't on Pablo Schreiber. It was on Timothy Simons.
Oh, okay.
But he also, according to IMDb, is 6'5.5". So they put a very tall man in a very powder blue jumpsuit.
That's a lot of material.
It's a lot of legs for days in powder blue. Woof.
Probably not vintage. They probably made that, and I applaud them for it.
I was surprised when the producers told us that it had been filmed in Georgia. I mean, there was one scene where I thought, okay, that's not really a Texas house, and this is not there's spoiler, but there's a house with a large wraparound porch. It's more of an office than a house.
Oh yeah,
and it's got roundness. It's got a big circular.
Looks a little more Victorian than the rest of the houses.
You can find that in Texas, but not as easy as you'd find it in Georgia. There are still lots of parts of Texas that look just like that in terms of the way the houses were designed and looked. I will say I wish they'd have cooled it a little with the colored filters. I know a lot of that's just an aesthetic choice, but there was a lot of like everything's red. Everything's orange. Everything's yellow because it's the 70s. But then again, I kind of associate the late 70s, early 80s with the color brown. I think...
there was a lot of brown.
I think it's because a lot of the clothing I had as a small child had browns in it.
Drab brown.
I will say my mother had the exact Tupperware set that she takes to...
I made a note of that. I'm like, I wanted to do a poll. Who didn't have that Tupperware would be an easier question.
That is true. And we also had that Cat's Eye game when I was a kid.
Oh, really?
So, yes.
I believe my parents might have had that owl thing. That was.
I think everybody had that owl.
Yeah.
I
think that was like, that came with like the keys to your house when you got the mortgage at 18%.
Yeah. I agree about the red. The red, I think, was trying to tell me something. I was supposed to be associating the red scenes, but I wasn't making the mental leap right then to get it. Whereas the rest of the colors, the yellows, the brown, not grungy exactly, but just Late 70s, early 80s. That's what it screams to me when I see it. Whereas, like, say, the aesthetic that they're going for in the second Wonder Woman movie, where it was like the mid 80s. So it was all the bright colors.
Everything was shiny.
Neon and that kind of stuff. You still know where you're at when you're watching that, but unfortunately, we hadn't got to that point.
No.
Yet in time.
It takes a couple of years to get there.
Yeah, but it wasn't like necessarily a happy time. You know, you were coming out of a very bad recession. In the country, unemployment was very high. You had the misery index of like the rate of inflation was very high. The rate of unemployment was very high. So it's not all that shocking to me that you do have sort of the reflection of that in the clothes, the cars, even the glasses. Like I come down to the glasses. These people in this show, like they're portraying people who are in their, I'd say like mid to late 30s, early 40s, right?
Yeah.
I was assuming much younger. I was assuming they were early 30s at the most because I was assuming they got married young, had the kids young.
Yeah, that's true. But they all, like the clothing, everything was weighing everybody down and made everybody look a lot older.
Have you seen high schoolers from the late 80s? They all look like they're 40.
Yeah, but I think that's
Or
where
the
I was
late
kind of going
70s.
with that, is that the way in which they dressed and the way in which, you know, sort of they accessorized, it made everybody look a lot older than they were.
The perm, yeah.
Although I will say the wig department did a very good job of having her hair reflect kind of what had been going on. Because you know this, Sheila, you have curls in your hair. Your curls aren't always perfect depending on what's going on. And if she was a little more agitated, frazzled, her hair was also a little more agitated or frazzled. So I thought that was a nice touch on the wig department.
And it's Texas and it's June, so it's going to be a little unpredictable.
Oh, no, you can predict it. It's all hot. It's all
No, I'm saying with hair and curls. Like when you have like curls and stuff, it's unpredictable. We didn't see the finished product. We see screeners. We see this ahead of time, so we don't always, like we saw there was, we got little notes for the VFX department, you know, that there was going to be visual effects that were going to be added post-production.
Right, yeah.
I didn't see a title card. But I knew from one very specific instance that this was 1980. And I knew very specifically that it was June 1980 because they said that the Empire Strikes Back was coming out.
Exactly right.
And I was like, you're June of 1980. In the opening credits that it does say the date, Friday, June 13th, 1980. I think there was enough going on that we knew that this was that time frame.
Yeah, and to give you an idea of where in Texas they were, they wind up in the Collin County Courthouse. Collin County is the county just north of Dallas. And so they mentioned Plano. Plano is like the next notable little burg north of Dallas, kind of on the eastern side. One of the more charming parts of the show was the kind of the water cooler talk that they had about Dallas, the TV show. It was like a runner that they had through several episodes where they would, when they were together, they were talking about what was happening on Dallas. South Fork Ranch, where Dallas ostensibly took place, is a real place near Dallas that you can go and tour today. You know, they didn't shoot much there, but it exists and you can see it. It's a real thing.
And where is the South Fork Ranch in relation to?
It would be about an hour and a half from where they were.
So there was a couple of Dallas references that I laughed at, especially when there was a group of parishioners sitting with the Reverend, and Betty at one point says, well, this isn't the Ewing Ranch. Like, I guess with his talk about Miss Betty's hair.
Yes, right.
Which is also then another peg in the timing of this, because Dallas came out in 1978 and ran until 1991.
That late? Wow.
Yes.
Wow.
But I say Dallas really had its heyday in the early 80s.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. There was a newspaper shot, and I screenshotted it because I'm like, what does that say? And it's talking about the movie The Shining, which came out in 1980 as well.
Right. Mm-hmm. They do reference that in dialogue.
You just got to pay attention to some of the details that the showrunners, work in to have you appreciate this time just a little bit more.
I wouldn't at all be surprised if that wasn't an actual reprint of the Dallas Morning News review of The Shining that was on there.
I'm sure they could have found that in the archives.
The camera lingered on it for a minute, and it's always interesting to me also as a movie fan that when, several years on from a movie that people continue to love and reference and uphold, that you can verifiably go back and look at the original reviews, such as the one that was on that newspaper, and find that at the time critics might have thought it was crap.
Yeah.
And that critic didn't. If the headline did not seem to suggest that they thought very highly of the movie.
Colleen, anything else for you on like the costume design or anything like that?
They did a pretty excellent job of kind of nailing the time and the place. And I was impressed by the hair and the wigs, because that can really kind of make or break a period look. And I thought they did a really good job, especially with the guys, which can be kind of a hard thing to do.
I felt right at home in my younger days, like watching these characters in this show, because like they did give this the authentic feel. And like I said, the glasses were very spot on. And that is also another thing, that if you don't get like that period's sort of accessories right, it doesn't give that authentic feeling. And I keep going back to the glasses, because like there wasn't an attractive person wearing glasses like, Sherry, I saw no glasses on her. She looked just fine, but the glasses just, it made everybody
there were lots of close-ups of Candy's glasses and the other
square, I call them like Golden Girls glasses, because they remind me of Sophia
Estelle
from Golden Girls. Yeah.
My mom wore those until a long time. My mom wore those a long time.
I don't know how much a person's choice of which church they go to like enters into the conversation elsewhere in the country, but in Texas, it's kind of a big deal. And so the fact that they're so active with their church, they go to various church meetings and groups, and it outside of just the normal services and all that, that's real.
They were there pretty constantly.
Yeah.
Right. And the social circles being wrapped up in the church as well.
Absolutely. And that is totally real. Even today, in these darker times, that is the way. And then the other comment, and this is, I'll try to be unspoilery about this, but there's a moment when some neighbors converge to try to sort something out, and one of the men is carrying a gun. Again, in other parts of the country, I don't know how that situation would go down in terms of people having guns, bringing guns to an event where one may or may not be needed. But in Texas, again, totally believable.
I forgot to mention in Time and Place that made me just scream laughing was when she's getting ready for her first assignation, I guess. And she A, like chicken fries a steak, and B, makes a like green ambrosia salad to bring with her.
Yes.
In the Tupperware, but specifically the Cool Whip green food coloring dessert. I have a friend who's a pastry chef, and we joke about sort of mid-century rage in cookery and how they came up with these sort of terrible foods, and maybe that was women like expressing their rage and serving their menfolk like Jell-O monstrosities.
That's funny.
So the fact that she was packing like a full meal with, ambrosia salad or whatever, you don't see what the final result of it is, but you see her adding a lot of green food coloring to whatever it was.
And creme de menthe as well. Like she was boozing it up as well.
Yeah. It made me laugh.
So it sounds like we agree that they nail the time period through many different avenues.
Yes. We've given you as much spoiler-free content as we possibly can at this point. First pass, without the spoilers, recommendation. Is this something you should watch? Do we love it? Should you leave it?
I would put it in the love it category. Often, for some reason, after I meet the creators of a show, all of a sudden I do feel strongly about it. I liked it before we got to talk to them. And I think it is what we've just been talking about in terms of them creating this mood through aesthetics, through effective costuming, and the actors going all in with their characters, making, believable characters that create a lot of pathos and make me wonder what's going through their minds. You don't feel that with characters in lots of shows, but I did here. Yeah, I even for a non-true crime fan, I think that there's enough to recommend here in terms of just getting really effective character work and a nicely told version of this story that engages you and makes you wonder, because they do tell it a little out of order in terms of, the information that you have after watching the pilot. Yeah, there's a lot to engage a person that enjoys high quality TV.
I would say watch it. It is, like Paul was saying, definitely kind of high quality TV. They definitely put the kind of care, and maybe budget isn't the right word, but it's evident that they put the effort into this production. I would honestly say it could have been a 4-episode rather than a 5-episode, but it's very enjoyable.
It's well made. I think it's well put together. And we talked a lot about how they brought this to life and brought us back to, we basically opened a time portal and stepped back into 1980 because they did have such authentic elements from the costume design, from the set design. The caliber of the acting is something that I found very compelling. I enjoyed watching this story unfold. Even though it was told out of order, I understood why it was done that way in order to develop the story. I like the fact that it's 5 episodes. I agree it probably could have been pared down just a little bit, but I understand the mechanism in which they also want to drop this. It's different, right? They want to do this one day a week event, which if you call back to our days in the 80s as children, if there was like a TV miniseries on for the week, you knew what you were doing for those 5 days or 4 days, whatever it ended up being. If you go back to like North and South and Roots and
the Thornbirds,
right?
Shogun.
There's so much. Yes, that's what we did.
Gather round, children, for
Right.
tales of long ago.
I actually appreciated sort of this movie of the week feeling that this type of series is after. And we even, Paul, you and I, we asked them a little bit about that, and they went all in for that,
Yeah.
agreeing that was sort of the output that they were looking for this. So it's an event, right? So they're not doing the typical, dropping of all the episodes all at once, or the Hulu way of doing like 1 or 2 episodes and then week by week. I loved how the story unfolded, and sort of the last 2 episodes have a bit of a turn in them, so that you're seeing the magic act unfold. So I really enjoyed watching it. I felt the episodes were jam-packed with lots of little tidbits, and character development was excellent. As we talked about, and Colleen, I actually saw in my notes, I was like, maybe some undiagnosed postpartum depression with Betty here.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm definitely in for this. I think it's definitely worth watching. Even if you're not a true crime fan, I just think that the story, because it is a true story, so that will grab other watchers. I find the story really compelling, and just the fact that from a true crime perspective, that it's something that we haven't heard before, for me was refreshing. Okay, so now, if you have not yet watched all 5 episodes of Candy, please pause here, go finish the series, and then come back, because we're going to dive into the plot points. We're going to talk about the highs, the lows, what worked for us, what didn't work for us. Can we talk about the big thing first? The big spoiler?
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Okay, so we were told to be under wraps about this with our pre-release coverage, to not let out the spoiler that there's going to be a large celebrity in episodes 4 and 5. Yeah, so we saw Justin Timberlake coming in as Detective Steve. What is his last name? And he's not on IMDb, obviously, because they don't want to spoil that.
He says it so Texan that it's it's hard to get the name, isn't it? Actually, the addition of Jason Ritter is pretty neat too, because those are the lead's husbands, both of them, as the cops.
I actually asked Paul before we started recording, I'm like, where was Justin Timberlake? I didn't find it. I was looking. And he was like, the cops? Jason Ritter, I knew him. I was like, I don't know who that is, but I know him. Justin Timberlake, I missed entirely.
Oh my God. Well, then that's pretty good costume design on him.
I guess.
I did not know that Jason Ritter was Melanie Linsky's husband.
Yep.
Oh, I like that even more now.
Yeah, because they were so playful together as the cops when they were
Yes.
like describing for the lawyers how they believe the crime went down.
The crime happened. Yes. I actually wrote down that that's like the comedic relief that we needed for this series. There really wasn't a lot of high comedy.
No, right.
But so Colleen, so you didn't realize that was Justin Timberlake at all?
Nope.
Oh, wow.
I saw that like sci-fi time thing he did years ago, but I haven't seen a lot of his acting, I don't think so.
Oh, see, I recognized him as soon as like he pulled open the closet, he pushed the clothes over. I was like, oh, look at you.
Yeah.
But he didn't really look like himself because he had one of those bad haircuts. The mustache is definitely a good disguise for him. And then he didn't act like himself. He was very Texan.
Well, and I was also assuming he was going to be like a person in the courtroom or something that would have been technically like a day or two of filming. I didn't think he was going to be in as much as he ended up being in.
The producers told us that they got to meet the actual guy that he's based on, and they made him sound like in real life he's kind of a character. So the fact that Timberlake was able to give us some of the few laughs available in this series matches up.
There was still a few people around. It is 42 years removed now. But when they started doing this, they were cute on the it was 41 years removed when they were doing the filming and stuff for this. So I thought that was the little tongue in cheek with the 41 blows.
Ominous number.
Yes, very ominous number. Now that you told me that Jason Ritter is Melanie Linsky's husband, I'm just like, oh, it's just like the synergy of that is just so cool. How did the pacing of the story work for you? I'll start with you, Paul, since you had the question before.
Well, as Colleen mentioned, the pacing could have sped up a little bit and eliminated a show. I'm not sure exactly where I'd trim the fat, but I think it was there to trim and go with 4 episodes. But the 5-night drop also feels right. I think they probably made the best choice for them. The way that they told it with like the big title cards that were like the day she died and all that.
Yeah.
That was not exactly a very 1980s way to do that, but still cool. It was very bold and in your face. And so instantly you started creating questions about timeline and am I looking for different things that are going to tell me where I'm at in time, or are they going to spell it out for me every single time? And luckily they made it easy on us to know where we were in time, but still that element of picking and choosing what they told us and when I usually enjoy. You remember when we covered the Stand, Sheila, and they messed with the timeline there. You and I were cool with it, even though it seemed like most fans hated it.
For me, it worked.
Yeah.
It worked, and it added some value to the story in sort of like turning the hands at different times.
In that case, I had read the book like 3 times, seen the other miniseries a couple times.
Right.
Like I needed something fresh. And so in this, I hadn't known the story, and I didn't. That helped create and perpetuate a little bit of the mystery for me. So I liked it.
What about you, Colleen? Did telling the story this way, did it work for you, or were you confused by anything in the timeline?
No, I wasn't confused by the timeline, and I liked that they we knew where we were ending up, but they let us figure out how we got there gradually. I liked that. The only thing I didn't really like was in the end, in the courtroom scene where she's explaining her version of events. I feel like the filmmakers made it pretty clear that she was not necessarily a reliable narrator.
Yes.
But I also didn't feel like they really gave us why.
Oh, I agree.
And I found that a little frustrating that they very clearly came down on the official record is not the truth. But I felt like her actual motivation was a little opaque, even to them. It felt like they were pulling back.
Well, in talking to the creator, Nick, I believe, given what he told us, that he thinks it was all bullshit.
Oh, yeah. I feel like they made that clear, which is good. I would have appreciated them tipping their hand a little bit more about what they thought her actual motivation was.
I would have liked to have seen something about this shushing and the fraying, I guess, of her nerves to be telegraphed a little more obviously, besides the stepping out on her husband. I think that's part of it. I would appreciate it a little bit more to show us that she was building up to something.
Yeah, I guess I felt we spent a lot of time kind of looking at herself in a mirror. We got a lot of shots of that. And again, she just felt very opaque to me. And I sort of wanted a little more insight into her thought process or her drive.
Yeah, it was like very suddenly at the end there, she's on a hypnotist's couch.
Yeah.
And,
Right.
and then all of a sudden that's, motivation.
The motive or the, sort of the triggering event.
Yeah.
But, that's actually really interesting because I watched the series twice because that's how my brain has to process these things.
You have to enjoy it and then analyze it.
And then, yes,
Exactly. And then take my notes. Exactly. Upon a second watch, I don't know if you remember, but there was like these cutaway scenes to when she was a child and she's running and she's got like a little bit of a bloody forehead, but it was all very, very disjointed. It didn't really kind of pay off when we were getting these backwards flashbacks because we didn't arrive at anything, like you said, Paul, until she was on the hypnotist couch. So we did get these little snippets backwards into time, but they didn't have the payoff.
Well, and if they feel like the story is bullshit, then the backward snippets don't really mean anything.
Why have them at all?
Yeah.
We never needed to see that.
It might have been a little more effective to show us some of that for Betty. Because, they showed us a little bit of how she deals with stress, like with their class and getting fired and all that. But it was very limited in terms of that stuff. Or the unfortunate situation with the foster kid.
Yeah.
Right.
But that was present time, pretty much, more or less.
Yeah, pretty close. Yeah.
I mean, I do love me some Raul Esparza, so I will always watch him be a lawyer.
He's kind of getting his niche in here, with the Law and Order and now this. I like the fact that the DA was dismissing Don Crowder's prowess in the court, that he's
his
not
antics.
Yeah, that he's not a murder attorney, so like what is he doing here? But yet he was able to build a believable case for the jury and sowing enough reasonable doubt. Like he did his job and he did it quite masterfully, I thought.
In the Better Call Saul kind of way.
Yeah.
I'm putting it on the record that the judge is biased. I also love the fact that they gave us sort of like where these people ended up at the end. I enjoy that tie up at the end, and the fact that for me the payoff was Don Crowder ran for governor of Texas. Did he ever become governor of Texas, or he just just ran for it? But like he's standing outside the courtroom, he's holding his handcuffs up high because he wants to be the spectacle. Candy's moment, he's also making it truly about him. It just nails home the point that everybody in this series is a selfish prick, really.
He's got a touch of Tiger King in him.
Everyone's out for themselves is really kind of what I took away from this story, is that there's a lot of selfish people in the world and people just going to do whatever they want to be happy, to find happiness however they can. And it's just almost like everyone else be damned.
With the writer, Robin, telling us that she was fascinated by the expression of female rage, and that being her desire. The scene at the end when it's Elaine that moves in.
Yes.
How she starts manipulating the daughter's food intake and telling her and all that, and basically starting this girl on the track that will put her right in the same spot as all the other women that they portrayed in the show. Were there other instances where you guys detected the writer coming through with that utter distaste for the box that women of the time and women now still find themselves in?
One of them is what Colleen was talking about, where she's making like the chicken fried steak, and she's like violently preparing this food because she's in a frantic rush and her nerves are all about her. So I felt the encapsulation of her distaste or her malcontent with her current situation when she was cooking. Basically, anytime Candy was cooking, I felt that she was
beating the shit out of those bowls.
Yeah, well, I mean, like she was making like spaghetti at one point, and I mean, oh my God, I felt so bad for the spaghetti in the pan because it was literally being beat up. So like the rage cooking for me was definitely once Robin had told us that, you know, she was trying to capture the rage in which these women felt in their own unique ways. You know, once she drew a line under that, then I was looking for the instances where I saw that. And for me, it was anytime Candy had to be in her homemaker role, not necessarily her mom role. She said that, you know, the kids were going to make Sundays with the kids. And then she's like, oh God, I got to go to English class or whatever it is. Oh, honey, could you just like, you know, microwave I don't know what he said, the chocolate and like, you know, chop up the peanuts or whatever.
Basically set up everything before she left.
Right.
Right.
I'll make the Sundays, hon. Don't worry. You go to your class, but can you do this, this, and this before you go? And just the look on her face, it showed that rage, that undercurrent, and it was really well done. With Betty, like I just felt her frustration because she's obviously someone who is very insecure in how she feels. So anytime Alan left her, she would feel this level of abandonment. It was almost like nothing that she did was good enough without him there to bolster her. How alone she felt, right? So like her rage came from a different point. And anytime that she was put in a vulnerable position like this, you know, this anger and it was like deflected anger because she would call like Alan's supervisor and, you know, give him hell for sending him out on the road. So these two women are deeply unhappy with certain circumstances of their lives, and they don't have healthy mechanisms to address it, which is, I think, more to the time than anything else.
The other line that really stood out to me, and I don't know if anybody else thought about this either, was Lizzie Borden. Not only because of the rhyme, Lizzie Borden was acquitted, and so was Candy. And I think they really drew a line because they had the prosecutor saying, oh, they're going to go with self-defense. What?
Yeah.
But really what it was giving the jury a reason to acquit a nice, white, upper class, married woman that they didn't believe could do something like this. And they didn't want to believe that she was capable of something like this. So basically giving them any out at all with the sort of cockamamie, repressed, my mother shushed me. They went, okay, great. We can write it off. We can acquit her, you know, like done. And so that I thought was sort of an interesting parallel. Candy was who she was. And it would have been very uncomfortable for them to say, oh, this mother, this housewife, this perfect creature.
We're going to sentence a mother to die.
Yeah.
Right.
And the right kind of mother. She's not a single mother.
Right.
She's not a divorced mother. She's, you know, a married mother with, you know, a boy and a girl, you know, kind of American ideal. And
she fits the mold.
Exactly.
It makes you wonder the reconstruction of the incident where Betty goes into the garage mid-conversation and comes back with the axe.
Yeah.
Doesn't that feel a little like they needed an excuse to introduce the axe, clearly?
Right.
Right. But this was the best they could come up with. And maybe it was just informed by the complete bullshit with which they regarded how the story was told in the court of law. Just like, what do you mean? Just an axe just kind of appeared. Well, I guess an axe just has to appear in the story then, because it doesn't make sense any other way.
Right, like it popped up pretty quick
Right.
in their narrative there.
Yeah, I was sort of looking forward to them giving us the bullshit version and then maybe a little hint of what they thought actually had happened. But
no, didn't.
But no.
There was enough, I thought, in that last episode when Candy was recounting version of events. There was enough, I'm going to use the word smugness, like on her face to show me that was not the truth. It was very subtle. It was how she looked, especially when she was finishing her testimony. She just kind of like sat and she kind of like shimmied herself like she was like regaining her composure. But it's just the look on her face. And it was definitely through the second watch that I was like appreciating her body language a lot more. And I was like, I don't believe a word out of this lady's mouth. Not that I didn't in the beginning, but it was just watching it through the second time and sort of, you know, putting all of this together that I was just like, excuse me. Then the story about this man that she was with from early November to early December, I'm like, I don't believe a word of that at all. That she was with another man after the affair ended. And she didn't want to name him because she didn't want to damage his family. And then like the ladies in the courtroom were all aflutter. And I think that's why Sherry didn't come back. her friend. Remember, she said her friend was
Yeah.
missing from the courthouse. So I'm like, I'm wondering if Sherry thought it was possible that it was Candy with her husband, but I don't even think that there was anybody, just based on how she was holding her, how she was conducting her testimony. And I think that's why she didn't want to out him. Either that, or the other half of me was like, it was Don Crowder who was the person. She couldn't very well say that.
Interesting theory. Did you guys look up how Candy Montgomery has turned out in real life?
No, I was satisfied with the fact that she like sort of started over and changed her name.
She did, but she is now working, or at some point was working as a mental health therapist.
Yes, they said that in the title card.
Her exact whereabouts are not currently known, but
known.
wow, could you imagine? I need mental health help. I look up on my insurance, I find a person, I go to them because that's who my insurance says I can go to, and then later on you find out they murdered somebody with an axe. Could you imagine?
Had to outdo Lizzie Borden by one whack.
Nice. Well, everything's bigger in Texas, right? So if you do a visual comparison of Candy with Jessica versus Elizabeth Olsen, Jessica skews much closer compared to the pictures that they're putting up on the Love and Death IMDb entry. They're not really obscuring Elizabeth's face with the big glasses and the weird hair, or the period appropriate hair, if you will. It'll be interesting to compare the two, actually, in terms of the way they tell the story, etc.
Oh, I just wanted to go back to the kids, the children actors.
Mm-hmm.
There's a moment at the funeral between Becky Montgomery and Christina where Becky comes out from the pew and walks Christina up the aisle, consoling her, has her arm around her. And I was just like, dang, for like 2 kids under 10 years old, like that was some range and some depth of character portrayal that I was actually pretty moved by it. I thought it was a very human touch, but to have it like played out with kids, I was stunned at the level of professionalism. And then, you know, going back to the interview that we did with Robin and Nick, they said that these kids were like more professional than the people who've been doing this for 30 years.
Yeah, the moments when Christina, I think, were trying to protect the foster brother, those stood out to me as like, wow, because you can read her face and she's like searching because for some reason, this child has to be the adult right now because her mom is freaking the fuck out.
Yeah, she locked herself in the bedroom. I'm not coming out until you two settle down.
Yeah, all that.
Letting the kids run amok outside. I'm like, oh no, that would never happen.
Well, even the kid acting like a brat did a pretty good job of being a believable brat, not someone acting like a brat. No, he wasn't a brat. It's just, I understand he was portraying a kid that he was a tough emotional position right then. But
he's got really big feelings and not the words to describe it.
Right, exactly. I don't want to be insensitive to someone in that position. If you're the dad in that situation, you'd be like, stop acting like a brat. That was another interesting thing. And perhaps part of the commentary on female rage that I wanted to mention was how the husband, Alan, I guess, could get away with not knowing how to change a baby's diaper. What?
Yeah.
Oh, wait, no, this was part and parcel of the time. I was appreciating how authentic that was. And the fact that he put dishwashing liquid into the dishwasher.
Oh, my God.
Because he had no idea that there was actually like dishwash detergent. Like,
he's allegedly an engineer. Come on.
Yeah, but like men were not, home engineers.
I mean, I agree. I agree that that's true. But that might have been also very harsh light to shine on it the way that they did. Like, this guy is totally unengaged at home. Just doesn't even know how to run a dishwasher. What? Change a baby's diaper. It was all on her. They wanted to make sure you knew it was all on her.
But honest to God, like that is how it was at that time. My mother took myself and my brother to Ireland. I was 2. I was 2 and a half. My brother was about 18 months. The dishwasher was not run. The washing machine was not run the entire time that she was gone because my dad did not know. And my mom tells me this story. Like this was something that, she was commenting when I first got married, that my husband was like, helpful around the house. Like he vacuumed, he does like a whole bunch of things. I'm like, yeah, your father had no clue. Honest to God, like intelligent man, carpenter, like able to build houses. didn't know how to run the appliances inside that house. Change a diaper, that was not something that was done by many men. I'm not going to say all men, but many men for that time period, that was the woman's work.
No wonder she was exhausted.
But when I saw him putting the dishwashing liquid into the dishwasher, like I just laughed. I was like, that is so on point. Like if he'd actually grabbed like the Cascade, I would have been like, that is so not real. We've dissected this 5-episode run and we've given you sort of the highs and lows. So let's give you our final tally. Is it worth your time to watch? Is it something you love? Is it something you'd leave it?
I would definitely say love it. I would say watch it. And I would think about its portrayal of America's expectations of women and sort of how they got where they ended up at the end of the story.
I think that's a really good way to like go into watching this as an essay on feminism in 1980.
I would encourage people to look at that and try to consider what the writers were trying to say. In addition to just telling the story, I think they had a message that they wanted to get across, and the way that it does end up, I think they want to make it clear like no one learned a lesson here.
Yeah.
They want you to, the viewer, but at the time, no one learned shit. And that's too bad because it cost this lady her life. So yeah, I'd recommend it. I still have that beef about wishing that Candy's building nerve fraying would have been stitched through from start to finish rather than just built up completely at the end. But I'd recommend it.
I agree with both of you. I think this is a love it. I think this is something that is worth watching. Also, just from the way in which it's being released, this 5-episode movie of the week kind of throwback. I think that's an interesting way to approach this because it's just not something we've seen in our on-demand bingey world. So just having a different spin on it is something like when I saw the trailers, it's saying that it was going to be released one night a week leading up to Friday the 13th. Not knowing when I watched the trailer that this happened on a Friday the 13th. I just thought it was an interesting way to do it. I like what you said, Colleen, that this is sort of a study on women in this time frame. And I think looking at it through that lens, looking for these moments, how are these women's story being told? What is the takeaway? I think that there's a lot in these 5 episodes. Like, I think it's pretty jam-packed with a lot of details. And we didn't even touch on some of the conversations that Candy has with the pastor. There's a lot in there as well as to point to the repression that women were feeling despite the advances that had happened especially through the 70s. The 70s was a pretty tumultuous decade for women's rights. So having this sort of at the bookend of that decade is a very interesting study in where women were at the time and in looking at where we're at now, especially in the home dynamic. I think that's very interesting as well. And the outlets that these people were looking for is also a very interesting take on how they were handling their stresses, because they didn't have a lot of the same mental health outlets that we have today. So it's just an interesting throwback, I think, to look at through that kind of a lens, seeing this repression and seeing that, this was everyone's neighborhood. Like, these types of things didn't happen in every, maybe not the extremes didn't happen in every neighborhood, but things like that led up to, say, like before the murder, that happened in every town in America, right? There's always going to be like the scandals that happen from, the pastor and his wife divorcing to, extramarital affairs. So yeah, I think that this was an interesting way to tell the story, and also the fact that it is a true story that we haven't really seen out there in the mainstream was also another really big hook for me. I thought it was a very well done production, so I definitely think it's worth checking out. I think it's worth your 5 nights investment. This takes us to the end of another True Crime TV Love It or Leave It episode from Pod Clubhouse. Please remember to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you found this podcast. Ratings help, reviews help. It helps everyone find the show so they can find out about Candy, and you guys can have a really great conversation about it as well. I am Sheila with Pod Clubhouse.
This is Paul with Pod Clubhouse.
This is Colleen.
Thanks so much for listening. We'll see you again soon.
Thank you for listening. This has been an original Pod Clubhouse production. Pod Clubhouse is a podcast network dedicated to encouraging collaboration among podcasters and friends to bring a fresh voice and diverse perspective on a wide array of content. Please visit and leave a comment for us at podclubhouse.com. Rate, review, and subscribe to our podcast feeds on Apple Podcasts. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. You can find us at Pod Clubhouse. Our DMs are always open, and we'd love to hear from you.